Welcome everyone to the On Helix digital session, what makes the best ecosystem for early stage company creation. On Helix, this year being digital, again, we embrace this opportunity to invite a range of our international partners to join us in conversations around life science ecosystems, their structure and specific support to some aspects of the industry. I am Elena from One Nucleus, and I am delighted to be joined today by 5 representatives of leading ecosystems supporting early stage company creation, who will tell us more about their own structure, of course, but also to share their key insights on how to nurture such ecosystems. And hopefully at the end of the day, we'll be more savvy and knowledgeable about them, but also how to collectively work together and support better this early stage scene of companies. So as a traditional discussion kickoff, I will ask the panelists if they could introduce themselves briefly, their organization, where they come from, but also maybe to give some hints into how they see that defined as an ecosystem and whether, if relevant, that fits into a larger definition of ecosystem. And to keep it fair, I'm going to go alphabetical order as usual. So AJ, if you don't mind starting.
Thank you very much, Shalene, and thanks for the invite. Great to be here today with a pretty exciting panel. So yes, I'm Ayokumni Ajetunmobi, AJ for short, and as Venture Development Manager at We Are Pioneer Group, I basically run venture building programs to identify, de-risk, and invest in early stage life science and healthcare ventures. Our programs are targeted at supporting venture-backed founders through every stage of their entrepreneurial journey. So that's idea on the back of a napkin all the way through to negotiating an exit with a large corporate. We Are Pioneer Group is an innovation ecosystem for the life science and healthcare industry. We integrate 3 core components: venture development, which I just spoke about. The second is investment. We provide pre-seed, seed, and Series A investment to early stage ventures. And then the third is our real estate activity. I believe right now across the UK, we have 9 sites in 8 locations. Covers the entirety of the UK, essentially, from Scotland through to northeast and northwest of England, through to Wales, the Midlands, and the Southeast. And to give you a sense of the scale, I think we're managing over 2.6 million square foot of lab and office space, 650 life science companies, which represents about 10% of the UK life science ecosystem. So, you know, one of the core questions that you asked is talking about ecosystems and what our view around ecosystems looks like. And, you know, my opinion when I think about ecosystems, it sort of sits into 5 core components. I'm sure it's shared by many of my colleagues, so they're going to hate me for going first and naming them all, but, you know, perhaps they might add some to this as well. But the first is really proximity to, you know, top quality university research, I think is really important, and research institutes. That's well funded by the government. The second is access to infrastructure, which, you know, we'll all be talking about today in terms of lab facilities and services. The third is access to talent. The fourth, access to capital. And the fifth, in my mind, is proximity to industry, to corporate partners. And I know we'll talk about each of these elements later on. But at a high level, that's our approach and our vision for what we're trying to do in each of our locations across the UK. And then very briefly, and to finish up, we look at ecosystems in 2 layers. So there's what we're doing at each of our locations and building ecosystems at each of our locations. But then there's also connecting these locations on a national scale. And that's the second layer of how we look at and develop ecosystems. So I'll pause there and I can delve into those later on.
Thank you, AJ. Yes, you're right. You covered the main topics. And I like this ecosystems of ecosystems. Maybe we can dig into that a bit later. Petra, would you like to introduce yourself and your role, and how does that
Yeah.
fit into the ecosystem discussion?
Yes, thank you, Aline. Thanks for the invite. I'm happy to be here today. My name is Petra Burgstaller. I am responsible for startup support at BioM. BioM is the cluster management organization for the Bavarian biotech industry. And we have been around for more than 20 years now, supporting the biotech community. We are non-profit, we are government funded, and as I said, have been around since the first biotech companies have started in Munich. There are around 270 biotech and pharma companies in the metropolitan area of Munich. And as AJ, we support founders and startups from the beginning. So from the academic teams that have an idea that want to commercialize their research results to growth funding. My colleague and I, Christina, we developed startup incubator, a virtual incubator. So we do not have real infrastructure. We are located in an innovations and startup center, but we do not have startup infrastructure for the really early startup that's in the making right now. But we have a range of instruments to support our startups and our early stage companies, starting out from mentoring programs. We do boot camps as intensive training formats. We, of course, have a financing and funding network where we do events for. We have our own pre-seed funding program that is also funded by the state of Bavaria, where we can finance academic founders teams. And yes, with respect to the ecosystem, as for BioM, we see ourselves right in the center of the ecosystem. So we are a one-stop agency for all the stakeholders in the ecosystem. Let it be startups, entrepreneurs, but also the more established SMEs, pharma companies, academics, investors. So one of our main tasks is to connect them with each other, but also not only on a regional level, but also on a national and international level through our network that we've built in the last 20 years. And of course, we draw from this network as well for our startups, bringing the experienced entrepreneurs into the mentoring program, for example. So there's an initiative in Germany that is called It Takes a City or a Region to Build a Startup. And we think that's very much true for kids as well as for startups. Thank you.
Thanks, Petra. And I like the analogy, and that would be interesting to compare an organization like yours offering more sort of soft skill support and mentoring compared to having the really hard facility support as well, and how that differentiate. So moving on to Stefan, and if you could introduce us your BaseLaunch and what sort of ecosystem that represents for early stage.
So thanks, Aline, for the invitation, and great to connect with all of you online. And my name is Stefan Emmerth. I'm a kind of PhD level background, then moved into industry a bit, and then kind of joined the organization which is running BaseLaunch. So BaseLaunch itself is an organization to further grow the innovation ecosystem in Basel, and BaseLaunch is an incubator we run out of this. What we do is we partner this with 5 pharma companies and a venture fund, being J&J, Roche, and then Bridge, and the Korean Bridge, not the American Bridge. Then we have CSL Behring, and we have Roivant and J&J, I think I covered that one. So what we try to do is we try to find early signs and morph them into companies we fund to de-risk the projects from the scientific aspects. And then we really work a lot with all these companies to build them out from scratch, to bring in senior people into the team, such that they can then eventually take a life on their own and go on to raise CSA financing. So we've done that since 2018. We did 13 companies. They've now raised around 270 million. The average fundraise is around 30 million per company. It's only therapeutics, I should say. And we're very grateful to do that together with our partners, which they help us out to evaluate and vet these projects. But they are also an integral part of our funding. So we give up to $500,000 convertible loans where we have support from our partners. And then on top of that, and I think that then comes to the, let's say, ecosystem discussion, we work a lot with external consultants and the like to really firmly evaluate these companies, but then also to start working with them on all aspects relevant, from science to legal to IP to more the business related topics. And for that, I think we can really plug into the ecosystem in Basel, which is really quite a big one. We have around 700 companies in that space, from very small ones to very big ones. And you have also all the enabling layers, from high profile scientific research to the venture funds, private investors, you have CROs. So everything we would argue that you need to found and fund and grow biotech companies in walking distance. But obviously we also recognize that pharma is very global. So we're quite well plugged into the global innovation ecosystem as well. And for us, it doesn't really matter where the people you work with are. For example, we do a lot of CMC work with someone out of New York. We do a lot of regulatory work with someone out of Munich. So that is for us obviously a nice thing, also going fully virtual now. So in a way, BaseLaunch itself is a little ecosystem reflecting the bigger ecosystem we have in Basel. And I think one number shows that one nice in the last few years. There's around 6 billion in private and public financing that went into Basel-based companies. So we believe that's quite a big number, and I think there's much more to come. And I agree with all of what my previous two speakers said on the ecosystem. I would add one thing, and I believe the most important part of a kind of healthy ecosystem is in a way the talent, and not that you are able to recruit talent, but if you have someone stepping into, let's say, a high-risk biotech company, and if it doesn't work out, what can he do afterwards, right? So is there enough fluidity there that if these companies fail and naturally there's a high attrition rate, can they move on to their next, let's say, job? And is there something around? And I think that's kind of for us very important aspect of a functioning ecosystem, the fluidity of talent. That it's not just 1-2 big companies and 10 small ones. That will not be enough to support high-risk projects in that regards. But that's really a string of companies that people can move into and out of, if the ones they are at right now are failing. And we're quite happy to see that more and more evolving in our region.
Thanks, Stefan. So yeah, interesting point about having ecosystem of people compared to ecosystems of companies. And maybe we can develop a bit on that, because I know they're interlinked, but that makes lots of sense. Thanks. So Elena, we talked about having a large pharma corporate being global, and how does that fit into that? So I think that's yours to pick up on.
Sure. Thank you for the invite, Elena. Pleasure to be here at the panel discussion. So my name is Elena Fernandez-Kleinlein. I'm currently based in London at our innovation center, and I'm running our Jlabs Life Sciences incubator here in Europe. And, really what I was thinking around listening to all the other panelists around the ecosystem, the way J&J approaches innovation is really to try to give the ecosystem and the geographical area, but also the whole entrepreneurial community, a global solution. And what we like to call this is really a toolkit. And in that toolkit, Jlabs plays an important role as an incubation opportunity, and I'll go in a little bit more depth in a second. But part of that toolkit is our innovation centers that are early stage acceleration centers where entrepreneurs can actually come, as well as getting to know each other better, to actually make those early stage transactions, collaborations, and partnerships. And I think that is an incredible opportunity for early stage innovation to get accelerated by a strategic partner like a pharmaceutical company, like J&J, for example. So besides the innovation centers, and we have 4 of them globally, we also like to think that our strategic venture arm is part of that toolbox. So combining the innovation centers that are really focusing on partnerships and collaborations, our strategic venture arm will be looking at strategic investments in different types of companies. And we like to think that, over the time, we've made and deployed a lot of billions of capital into the European ecosystem to really nurture and support and finance some of these great innovations and ideas. And so third pillar, so to speak, or the third part in that toolbox, and it's a global network of 13 sites. And I think this is another one. While we are part of the European ecosystem here, we are also part of a global network of incubators, industry-led incubators. We have currently over 732 companies in our portfolio, and they range across different sectors within healthcare, whether it is the classical biotech, pharmaceutical, but also medical devices, consumer and health tech, health IT. So we do have a very broad scope of what companies we actually bring into the incubator and offer them the support. So I think some of the other members have already mentioned this, but really our incubator is looking on the one hand side to support with a very capital efficient and a flexible platform these emerging companies so that they can really transform the science and the scientific discoveries into products. And on the other hand, we're really trying to remove the obstacles that they still have when they are very early stage and are trying to get up and running on their scientific discovery. So for us, it's helping remove barriers and obstacles such as business, financial, or even operationally, if they are looking for an infrastructure in our Jlabs incubators. We are located in Belgium, and I think that is in itself a very vibrant ecosystem of biotech as well. We are located at the heart of our Janssen Pharmaceutica R&D campus, which is one of the probably largest R&D centers in Europe with over 3,000 scientists. And that will give you already access to talent, expertise, and support from an industry-led incubator as well. We're obviously working very closely with universities in that ecosystem, TTO, VCs, government, and others to support in the support region there and supporting also our companies. But I would say, I think just a takeaway from my end for the audience would really be to say we are a very broad healthcare company, and our approach to generate innovation ecosystems is really to be able to offer a toolbox to these entrepreneurs so that they can pick and choose whatever is right for them at the right time. And I think the sequence and when you're approaching, for example, strategic partners is quite an important one, and we can certainly talk more later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. And yes, definitely this concept of having the best of both worlds of the small ecosystem that isn't really connected in a global scale, that's very interesting and important. Olivier, if you would like to introduce us your job at Genopole, which is also interesting region, but also having a technology focus, which I think makes it also very, very interesting.
Yes, thank you, Alex. Thanks for the invite. And nice to be part of such an exciting panel with a broad range of ecosystem definitions and operational way of addressing the question we're focusing on today. So my name is Olivier. I'm the director for enterprise support at Genopole. Genopole is a 20-ish years old biocluster located near the south of Paris, in the south of Paris, sorry. We are working with, compared to what we've heard so far, we are a relatively small ecosystem if you work on the very narrow definition of ecosystem. We're currently working with 80 to 90 companies from very early stage startups, even before they are startups, to more established SMEs and the presence of some larger companies. But we've got also in that biocluster the presence of a lot of academic institutions, research labs. AJ mentioned universities, of course, as well. And we kind of mix the whole thing together, and that's how it works, right? So we run a number of dedicated programs to startup support and startup de-riskization, because that's really what we're doing. We de-risk the early stage companies. And that question of ecosystem is really at the heart of what we're doing, because at the very core, we're also operating real estate operation, I would say. So highly specialized real estate, yes, of course. So we provide office space, but also lab space, shared platforms, technological platforms, because access to technology is sort of a tricky phase for the early stage startups most of the times. The good question about ecosystems, how broad is the definition of our ecosystem, is really at the heart of what we're doing. Because apart from that, because we're a small operation compared to what we've heard, compared to what BioM does, Petra this is an amazing job you're doing for the whole region, right? And so the stake for us is really to build a second level ecosystem with a lot of operational connections to a broader range of every kind of organization that would help the de-riskization of startups. So my point is, if we don't have access to enough finance very locally, which is the case, then we've got to build networks all around. A bit like, and I'm being humble, but I should say, but a bit like Elena mentioned before, which is, yeah, let's bring on board a larger, more virtual, maybe less physically present ecosystem of expertise, of funding, of talent, of course, around the companies we're working with. And that's what we are doing, including at a global scale, right? So we don't want to think of ourselves as only a local ecosystem, not even national ecosystem. My take is at least a European very strong operation can be very, very efficient these days. And also, especially when it comes to funding, we're kind of trying to build a very wide transnational ecosystem around that. But I can delve into that later, of course.
Thank you, Olivier. Thank you all. So if I'm hearing what you all saying, you all come from different background, different type of ecosystem, but you all mentioned this concept of layers. So of course, an ecosystem, it has all these components AJ mentioned, but you can't nail them perfectly all, unless maybe you're Massachusetts, and even though you probably have some misses here. And so how you compensate is just to create an additional layer, and so to seek for the expertise of what's missing in the global pool of our industry. So I'd like to concentrate on this the first layer of ecosystem to start with. So this sort of nucleus of where you are. I was about to ask you which element you would pick as the most important for the success of the ecosystem. And because Stefan already gave his answer around talents, can I go to you and just ask you the how? Of course, talent is incredibly important. And, I'm based in Cambridge, and so we have this attraction because of the talents, but the drawback being it's a very competitive market as well, and you have some misses. So maybe if you can just explain a bit, which aspect of talent you think are important and how you nurture them, and then if others want to add.
Yeah, I mean, specifically talk about how we do it. So very often the projects we look at are coming out of academia, right? Which is this great science around. And then when it moves into more translational aspects, it's just a different set of skills and experience you need. And we very much believe that this is something you need to have done, you need to have been experienced in. It's not something you can learn in a workshop or something like that. So the way we operate, and specific for us, is like when we start working with a project, and it's usually before it's actually funded, Obviously, we do our vetting and we talk to different people and so on. We work with these companies. And then very soon we start identifying who we could bring in, let's say into a chairman position or into a board position. That when we then fund the company, we have usually the inventors out of academia already teamed up with a co-founder being a chairman or a board member. And sometimes it's also a CEO, but just someone who can complement from the expertise. Because then the next steps are really crucial to do the right things and to do the de-risking. But then there's a lot of different discussions around what we typically have is a lot of discussions around which indications to go and these kind of things. So there's a lot of experience going into all of this thinking with ideally people who have done and who have developed drugs already, because it's such a difficult endeavor to do. So for us, the talent part is very crucial to really bring in very early on talent to complement these teams and really get going. And then kind of you fast forward, like if you really want to raise a CSA, it's almost impossible to be only the academic team. It was a bit more possible in the past. I think nowadays, most venture funds do require to have teams which are mixed between the inventors and people who have done it already. So we're kind of also just reacting to that market, but also realizing that it does make a lot of sense. So for all the comps we've done sooner, kind of towards the CSA latest, had that set up, which then enabled them to raise venture capital financing.
Does anyone have some example on nurturing the talents in their ecosystem? Maybe cross-fertilization as well, because surely there is a critical mass that you need to reach. And so how do you do that? Olivier, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking back to what Petra mentioned before that we also do, which is mentoring. And maybe there's something to be said about bringing that to the next level. Because Stefan is absolutely right? No matter the stage we're in, at some point we're going to have to bring different people with different skills on board. And also, generally speaking, when it comes to scaling our startups, then a whole different set of skills and set of experience is going to be required. So what we're trying to do, we're at the very early stage on that, but what we're trying to do is we're not only chasing for mentors, we're hunting for co-entrepreneurs, and we've got to earn for them at least at a European level. And I would argue that in the right conditions, we could probably be looking further than that. But that's exactly something, especially us, because again, like I said, we're a small ecosystem. Even if you take the broader Paris region, that's not enough to nurture all the companies that will be needed to be worked on. So yes, exactly what I said. The mentoring habits we've created can be used for further step forward in that regard of bringing the right talents inside the companies.
Then how do you attract them if you feel you're not at this stage of you've got enough in your own pool of ecosystem?
So that's a good question, and I think we're currently experiencing that. The world has slightly changed. And let's say, I don't want to go into that, oh, this is an opportunity, but the next 16 months have been sort of crucial. We're seeing more and more inquiries for, let's say, for example, previously experienced funders that have left the company, it's been hired, and they are looking for the next gig. So we're receiving, we're working with them, but we're having discussions with people from, at that time, for example, from Sweden, so we discuss with other ecosystems, I would say, and then it's an open market, right? So does it make a very strong difference for the people we're talking to in Belgium, for example, who have run like two or three biotechs and then are looking for the next challenge to join a very promising technology-led operation that requires that set of skills? Not necessarily, actually. So the result is we've got a company that I won't name because they're kind of negotiating the deals. but with bringing another co-founder on board, but we found them in Sweden, thanks to our colleagues in Sweden, right? So it can be done. The only thing is it has been, I would say, tailor-made. So we haven't found the right way to do that sort of on a large scale, right? So we take company after company, but because we're small, that's fine. We take company after company, and we are looking around to our partners, and we're interrogating them. And the more we know about the ecosystems, and I'm sure I could do that with BioM or with anyone here, by the way. Who do you have in mind? You know them. Who do you know is ready to start the next gig? And yeah, and it starts to work, right? But it had to be handpicked, right? For the time being, maybe.
Yeah, and then it's back to this other layer of ecosystem. Does anyone have anything to add about talent cross-fertilization, for example, amongst different parks in the same country? AJ?
Sure. I mean, I think this is a really great conversation, and a couple of thoughts that I'm getting from this. First of all, successful ecosystems are built by successful companies, right? So, companies that are able to start up, scale, develop, grow, achieve exits, potentially create serial entrepreneurs, some of whom could even become angel investors in a new crop of companies. I mean, comparing to across the Atlantic, that's what they do so well in Boston and San Francisco is, really create this ecosystem of successful founders of successful companies. And I think in Europe, that's where, we're trying to get to in each of our organizations is to do that. And for me, I look at innovation and entrepreneurship as, typically it's a contact sport, right? You need people ultimately coming together. And that happens in different ways. People coming together to spark new ideas, people coming together to get access to specific expertise or talent, coming together to be able to de-risk certain elements of your business model. For example, in the life sciences space, a lot of the business model requires partnering with industry. So, getting the right people from industry early enough in the startup to be able to, test certain assumptions about what works and what doesn't. And to everybody else's point, it's very difficult to have all of that in a single location. And it's increasingly becoming more important now to look at how you build synergies nationally, which is what we've been doing, also internationally, and Europe more widely, I think. So look at how to get better integrated from that perspective.
AJ, I think you're breaking a little bit. Sorry. We just missed the last minute of what you said. Sorry.
Just say I'm breaking up.
You are still.
Hopefully, it's better.
No. Should we just pause for a minute and I'll go back to you after on this point. So we were on this talent, you got it all at your doorstep. And so how do you leverage other network to do that? I think AJ made an interesting point about successful entrepreneurs who are then becoming investors and so recycling that money. But often what we see in that is a wish to give back to their own ecosystem, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I guess question would be is how you can leverage that at a global scale of, well, this successful entrepreneur willing to be a bit more global. So I don't know if in Munich you have this example and of attracting externally or vice versa.
No, what just came to my mind as you said that is when we started out with our mentoring program, that was in 2011. So we didn't have problems at all to acquire mentors. So we asked the experienced entrepreneurs in the cluster whether they would be, whether they would help out, they would support the young entrepreneurs, they would give their expertise to them, and they were very, very willing to do so. because they wanted to give back. They started out in that cluster and they have been successful, so they wanted to give back. And often they said that they wish they had mentors like that when they started out. In the beginning, we had more mentors than we had mentees. That has been changed since then. So they use the mentoring program a lot, and it has been a real help for the young entrepreneurs. It's also very flexible, so it's not a really very strict protocol they have to follow, but they can ask different people with different expertise to get different feedback. But I would also say, like, if we change for a little bit, that access to funding, at least from my experience, is also very important. Not only access to talent. I agree completely with what Stefan said before, that it is really necessary to get the experienced people to the young companies. But I think you also get this with, let's be more specific, with access to smart money. So if you really have experienced investors, and we have a great investor scene in Munich that are experienced in the life sciences, and you don't only get the funding with those investors, but you also get their network and their ecosystem. And they often have access to the right people for the startup, to potential co-founders, also to pharma partners. So if you have access to those investors, you also get access to the other critical parts as well.
And you think that's important to have these smart investors collocated within your ecosystem? And that's
well, it makes it easier to have them local, but yes, of course, it's a global industry. At least European investors, of course, we have seen over the last 1.5 years, we go more on an European level as well. For example, for our pitch events that we have, we did that before in person, of course. So we had pitches for the local investor scenes, but with the pandemic, we did it in a virtual format. And of course, an advantage there is to get more investors to the scene, and it broadens the exposition for the startups.
Yes, that makes sense. And actually it leads to a question to Elena, maybe on this investors and local. How do Jlab company do raising money? Because we've got such an international and global network. Does it tend to be quite local, or is it just very, very broad and global?
Because I think it depends on the stage of the company. Early stage companies traditionally, particularly in Europe, when you compare it to North America, they tend to go on for non-dilutive funding and with government support at early stages, at least to get some data or some proof of concept on their hypothesis, and then go over, obviously also with the help of potential angel investors, and then go on to more local VCs to raise some of their early seed stage and Series A, and then more broader into European or global VCs at a later stage as well. I think it really depends on the company, what type of company it is. Sometimes we're seeing in the biotech life sciences a slightly different approach to consumer companies or medtech. So there is a different nuance depending on what type of company it is. So within Jlabs, what we're trying to do is, because also of our global network, is bringing these VCs closer to the companies we have in our network. Okay, so we are, not only like Petra was saying as well, we're organizing obviously meets and pitching events. I mean, that is a given as well. One-on-one interactions to get to know the VCs and getting closer to them. And I think also, you know, helping them with grant writing if they need to at the beginning, that is really the support level. I do think also there is a strong view that, particularly also in Europe, from the VC community, that they do encourage startups to engage earlier stage in their life cycle with strategic partners, such, for example, as J&J or other pharmaceutical partners, just because we have the ability to de-risk earlier on. And, you know, there is actually an interesting article that came out earlier this year. I don't know whether you guys may have seen it, from some authors from Biogeneration Ventures and Forbion, looking exactly at the impact of success rates, you know, of companies that have engaged earlier stage with strategic partners. And I think that is something that companies underestimate, and don't really, you know, they may be a little bit hesitant to do that because they just don't know when the right moment is to engage with a strategic partner. But yes, talent is important, funding is important, but equally the opportunity to tap into a strategic partner earlier on, even at preclinical stage, to get that guidance where this company can actually end up and accelerate, and how they can best accelerate their innovation. So I think, again, I think being a industry-led incubator, we clearly see the advantage of you know, experts within J&J mentoring these companies, because we do give them that sense of guidance depending on where they are in their development.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think early stage companies are hesitant to engage with a strategic partner because they're afraid that will just maybe limit their options in the future? And I don't know how we can pitch that better to them, because I think you're completely right. It's a really good way to do risk day-to-day producing. So
yeah, I think there is, you know, there is a mix probably of multiple factors. There is this hesitancy because people think once you're with J&J, you're always with J&J, and you don't leave your doors open. But I think ultimately it's all about, you know, IP generation and, you know, who does own what ultimately. And I think the best thing to move forward here with is being extremely transparent, you know, in collaboration with strategic partners. And I do think younger startups, maybe even not so experienced CEOs, may just be hesitant to be on the table with big pharma and negotiate, you know, the terms of that collaboration or partnership. But I think the most important thing is really be transparent, be exactly very clear what you want of that partnership, and put those guardrails up, you know, to get that protection. For example, just to give you an example, I mean, it starts even with non-confidential information. When companies come into Jlabs, we do not ask any confidentiality, any confidential information, because we don't want to enter into a space where we, you know, have to start putting up sort of firewalls, etc. It is made at ease for the company when they come into the incubator. We are not taking equity. We are not taking any IP or any confidential information. And that is hopefully putting them at ease in the sense that they are still able and they have still the ability, and, you know, to go out and still be pursuing obviously their goals and their objectives while getting the support and the nurture from Jlabs.
I mean, maybe I can say something on that. I mean, I would perfectly agree. Especially the small companies just need to do their homework, right? Like, what's their strategy partnering? They just need to make up their mind before actually going out. Like, I don't know, do they want to partner at this indication, that one? Do they want to partner at the first versus the second product? These kind of things. And once they really know that, then there's no, I mean, there's no reason not to do that, right? You just need to be mindful before you go out what you want actually, and think then these can be great collaborations. If you're not, obviously, then if you haven't thought that through enough, then that can be a bit of a problem for the small companies to go on. But I think most of them are well aware that that's something to be thought through before before. Something else I want to quick comment on the financings. I think it's very important to have it localized. The earlier it gets, the more local it is often. But I think one has to be a bit mindful with public funding into companies, because that is something which, and we see many companies which kind of live for years on public funding. I think the real take on these companies once they manage to get kind of informed private money into it. And you have to be a bit careful to not kind of lift too many companies, you know, up, which actually might not have a reason to live with just giving too much public funding away just to bolster the numbers. I mean, Switzerland is in that regard very, as a liberal country. There's absolutely no public money going into private companies. That's just kind of the way Switzerland does that. And I do think it has some reasons to do it, because as I said, the real test is, do you get, let's say, venture funds interested enough to invest for business reasons rather than other reasons. I do think one has to be, it's great, but you have to be mindful of that part, at least. That's our view on that one.
Yes, makes a lot of sense.
So,
Olivier?
yeah, sorry, on the strategic partners part, we've been working on a lot on this on the past 3 years, a lot of resources dedicated to that. And I have to say, yeah, there's a lot of education to be provided to the startups on that, because they might be reluctant at first, especially the inexperienced ones, the very early stage ones, the I'm coming from academia ones. But what I find interesting is actually what you just said, Elena, which is it's also about the culture of the corporation. So you mentioned the fact that you're doing a lot of non-specifically conscious work, but it's conscious, but you design a lot of your processes not to scare the startups, let's say that. So there's no an immediate aggression on non-confidentiality, the non-equity at the first, etc. So you're kind of seen as a very, very good partner. And that's one thing we've learned, is that we're working with a lot of different corporations, especially because we're a genomics organization. So we're not only focused on human health, we also focus on bioeconomy. And so different verticals, so different corporations. And we also support them. So we're not going to support J&J because J&J knows how to do that, right? They've got the right culture. It's not true for all the same corporations. So some of them ask us, how can we approach better? It's not a matter of sourcing, but how can we approach better the startups? And so we work together as well to sort of, and I'm not going to name names, of course, but we've worked recently with a very large company, which is not a pharma company, on exactly that, which is, okay, change your processes, change your cultures, change the way you see the startups as well. And it's all going to come to it. And we're kind of seeing the fruits now. So it's educate the startups and working with the corporations to sort of change their approach of what a startup is and how they should deal with that.
Yes, very true. A double-way education system, and it's all down to communication. So I'm looking at the clock, and we had lots of very interesting points raised. I think what I was envisaging at the beginning is actually the importance, not necessarily of the ingredients or components of the ecosystem, but more than that, it's about the timing, which I think is definitely something that is crucial, and that ecosystem are also playing a crucial role in that. And it's this sort of multi-layer that I thought was sort of maybe local versus global, but it's much more complex than that. So maybe just as a quick wrap up, because we discussed it, could you tell me just in a few words what you think are critical as a very face-to-face physical ecosystem, the components that are, and the ones that definitely more global? And I'm going to do a quick round the other way around, if you don't mind. So Olivier, could you start? What is crucial, keeping face-to-face? What would be much better to have global as an ecosystem?
I'm becoming more and more radicalized on the issue. I think a lot of what we've been doing over the past 15 months, 16 months has been done, right? And it has been done in different ways with a different set of obstacles, but it has been done yet. I mean, we've seen a lot of investment poured. We've seen a lot of strategic partnerships close, which we've seen a lot of things, and we've done that. And even when it comes to talent, the fact that we can decentralize more and more teams, that the fact that the work, even in terms of infrastructure, by the way, because we're also an infrastructure company. I mean, you can sort of outsource a lot of. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question. I mean, I'm really seriously questioning the fact that we've got to, of course, there's a lot of habits, but I'm really starting to questioning the fact that operationally speaking, we really need that face-to-face thing. And I shouldn't say that because I'm probably losing my job in 2 hours, but really, I'm just starting to question that more and more. Maybe the investment thing is still, I mean, investment, sorry, no offense to nobody, but venture capital is very conservative industry in some regards, and the fact that of being able to reach the founders and to be face-to-face to them is probably where it's going to be more critical. So I would say that if an answer needs to be said, I'm not sure.
Okay, so I put you in the category of global curious, if that works for you. Thanks, Olivier. Elena?
Well, you know, I'm just thinking, if I look back at the last 18 months or so, I think this whole virtual world that we're living in has really democratized the process for everybody because of the limitless geographic reach. And, you know, you're increasing the bandwidth of these early stage companies that have just a greater chance to get the right level of attention and even make their cases to VCs based on the West Coast with an 8-hour difference or a 9-hour difference. So I think actually what we've experienced is a radical change also in expectations of these companies. They don't want to go back to just their local ecosystems anymore because this virtual post-pandemic world has opened up other opportunities to them. And we've seen, for example, by instilling some virtual CEO roundtables, and that we can actually connect them much faster than we used to face-to-face. So I think, as in everything, I take more of an approach of a balance. I think that definitely we will maintain those positive aspects of this democratization, but we will not completely lose the human touch and face-to-face. At the end of the day, it's all about network and connectivity. And yes, we can do that over Zoom to a certain degree, but I'm still looking forward to meet people in person one day in an event or so. But I do think the world has changed. Definitely, it's not going to be as it is. And I think it bears the question for us as part of the ecosystem. You know, what is our new purpose? What is our North Star in this new world going forward? And I think that's an interesting conversation, maybe for the next panel.
Definitely. And maybe a few months in as well, because yes, I think we still need to recover and see that. But thank you, Elena. Stefan?
Yeah, so I must say what I really enjoy is that we could move all our contracts to DocuSign and don't have to send it around in the world. I can remember when we set up BaseLaunch, like you had to go to New York, another one to London, and then something into Switzerland. That was a pain, and now you can just send out PDF. So that is great. But I mean, I think we're a bit, you know, we're still in this, and it's only 1.5 years. So I'm not sure we can draw a conclusion yet. What I must say is, for us, not much has changed. So everything worked as before, or we could even kind of increase reach, no travels and so on. Everything went quicker. I must say, what does not work that well for us are, let's say, these digital partner conferences like the Bio Europe and so on. It does work, but it's not as effective as if you would be there physically. So that part, obviously you can meet and so on, but it's still not as effective, at least for us. And I'm sure colleagues from pharma could also comment that it's maybe a bit annoying to sit in a meeting room for 5 days in a row. I guess these things will also move a bit backwards, but I think in general, so far it's increasingly working fine, but I think it's just too early to draw a conclusion.
Yeah, I think someone said to me at a partnering meeting, actually what you're missing is the fun. That's what we missed in our work life. But sorry, that's also another panel conversation.
Yeah.
What you just said resonates with Elena's democratization point. And actually maybe a BaseLaunch was already really globally connected even pre-pandemic, that didn't change too much for you, whereas maybe that had changed for the smaller or with less reach ecosystems that had this opportunity suddenly. That's true for ecosystems or for companies. The ones who were connected before were they still connected, but the one who actually suddenly were sat home, they had this free time and opportunity to reach out to these West Coast investors and others. So yeah, so maybe it's rebalancing a bit the word game, which is good. Thanks. Petra, do you have anything to add on this global local line?
Definitely agree with you, what you said, that the fun is taken out of these partnering conferences. Of course, yes, you can do it, but yeah, meeting people over a coffee or so, that is surely missing. I think it depends on the instruments you use. It has both advantages and disadvantages. Just as I said before, like our pitch event, so we did do it in person pre-pandemic, and of course the interaction of the startup teams with the investors, that was more closely. They could dive into deeper conversations, but on the other hand, doing it virtually had brought more attention to them. They increased the level of attention. If you look at the boot camps we are doing, these intensive training format for academic founders teams, we started out doing them locally, and in the last couple of years we have done them within the framework of EIT Health, and there are European startups coming together for these boot camps, and that has brought another level to these boot camp, and the interaction between the startups coming from different locations, that has been very fruitful. But of course, it involved a lot of travel and a lot of time for the startups or the academic teams that they don't have. They're still in the lab. So this year, we're going to do a virtual boot camp together with a partner in Sweden, and we're going to see how this works.
I'm sure it'll be fantastic. And AJ, hopefully having your sound back. So saying local versus global. And I think, can I ask, adding a layer, because obviously you have the parks, you have the network of We Are Pioneer Group, and how does that fit in the whole UK landscape, and then at the global scale. So I think you're the one juggling with more layers than the others. So how do you see that integrated and working together in the future?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Firstly, can everyone hear me?
You're back.
Great stuff. Excellent. I'll keep it brief, perhaps, so that I don't lose sound. But it's fascinating. We've always viewed our approach as being more than just our singular locations. We've always looked at things in a networked way, and the pandemic has only accelerated that. But even pre-pandemic, we used to see companies collaborating with each other across our science parks, across our incubators. We used to see companies acquire other companies in different parts of the country. What we're excited by and the opportunity that we see is that this sort of parochial nature, which has often been a challenge in the UK, where different ecosystems really just focus on what's directly in front of them rather than looking at how they can work with others across the country. We're starting to see those barriers getting eliminated, and that's very exciting. And we want to catalyze that and use our infrastructure across the UK to enable that and catalyze that. But more broadly, innovation and entrepreneurship, as I said the last time, it's still a contact sport. You still want to meet people, still derive energy from interacting with people in person. The spark of ingenuity, I think, still is best fleshed when you're in a room together, and I don't see that changing. But I think certainly when we're thinking about scale and when we're thinking about how to scale successful companies in Europe, when we start looking at things more broadly, more nationally, more internationally, there's great opportunity there. And the silver lining, if we can call it that, within the last 18 months is people are more aware of the opportunities to do that. So that's where I see things hopefully going.
Thank you. Very wise concluding word. It's having more opportunities to access, having a better understanding of what's going on and the different stakeholders and just opportunities to access them. And one day we'll get back to this, having more fun. So I think we've reached the end of today's conversation, but obviously we could carry on for hours and hours on every single topic. It was really interesting. Thank you very much all for having joined. Hope you enjoyed it too. I hope we'll all keep in contact to keep this global network carrying on. And obviously for the ones who watched, there is other on-demand content on the OnHelix platform, so feel free to reach out to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much.